electric vehicles, obviously. And one of the things that I was talking with the panel before today, and one of the themes that we talked about for this panel is the fact that the panel members here and a lot of the things that are happening in Silicon Valley are basically about recreating and fundamentally disrupting a 100-year-old industry. So if you think of vehicles, what started with Ford, General Motors, it's basically been about the same for about 100 years. And what we're going to talk about today is all the trends, all the thought that is happening by these gentlemen to change that. So that's the overarching theme. So first I'd like to have everybody in the panel introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies. Maybe we'll start with you, Ian, and go down.
Okay. Hello. It works. I'm Ian Wright. I'm the founder and CEO of Wrightspeed. It's a startup company just down the road, about 5 miles. We make powertrains for medium-duty trucks. They're electric powertrains with a range extender. And the basic idea is it's the most cost-effective powertrain you can get, has the shortest payback time, saves the most amount of fuel.
Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Castellas, and I'm the founder and CEO of Motive Power Systems. And we develop software and controls for electric vehicles, specifically trucks and buses.
Sujit?
Okay, I'm founder and CTO of NVIDIA Systems. My name is Sujit Kumar. NVIDIA System is located in Newark, right next to the Barton Bridge. Our mission is to mass commercialization of electric drive vehicles. And we see 2 main barriers, battery cost and miles per charge. It turns out that the answer to these 2 questions is energy density of the batteries. So NVIDIA is focused on increasing the energy density of the batteries so that you need less batteries and also you get more miles per charge.
Hi, I'm Richard Lowenthal. I'm the founder and chief technical officer of Coulomb Technologies, my 6th startup. I've had 2 go public and 3 sold, and so I love being among entrepreneurs. This company is, so you hear about all the electric vehicles. We're the gas station for the electric vehicles, so we provide charging infrastructure and in particular business models so that people can make money charging these vehicles, so they'll deploy an adequate infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Ben Kalo from Robert W. Baird. Robert W. Baird is a privately held investment bank headquartered in Milwaukee with offices all over the United States, but also in Europe and in China. And within Baird, I'm part of the energy technology research team, and underneath that, I cover 4 major sectors: biofuels, biochemicals, renewables, energy efficiency and services, and then advanced transportation.
As you can see, the electric vehicle market spans the design of the vehicle itself, the batteries, the charging stations. So it's not just one thing, it's not just a car, it's many things. So one of the things we'd like to do is ask Ben to give us an overview of the EV market and what it looks like and kind of how he sees it.
Sure. So I think coming from the public markets, I wanted to first talk about the stock market and then talk about the fundamentals, because I like to dissect those 2 from each other. And overall in the stock market, I said that I cover energy technology, and that sector has had a rough go in the past couple of years. Year to date, the energy technology sector is down about 13% compared to the NASDAQ, which is up about 16%. Really, I'd say that we're in the early innings from a financial market perspective. Obviously, we have Tesla out there. I formerly covered Tesla. That has been a bright spot in the clean technology sector. It's up year to date, roughly around 4 to 5%. And then, we also have several battery technology companies out there which have had a very rough year and really rough 2 years. Year to date, if I take a basket of those companies, they're down 76%, and that's really these standalone, pure play battery technology companies. Now, if I move on to fundamentals and paint a little brighter picture, because I think if we just look at the financial market, that's bleak. So far, year to date, I think sales have come in for the first half of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles around 50,000 automobiles sold in the United States and globally, which is about 90% of what was sold all of last year. So we're on track to really double last year's sales, which I think is another bright spot as we look at the sector. And then if we go on and we look out to 2020 and we say that we get a 2.5% to 5% penetration rate of total global vehicle sales, that's where we get this $150 billion, $200 billion market opportunity out there. So that's why I kind of like to separate the two, the financial markets from the fundamental markets. And then, all of us here are focused on different aspects of the value chain, which some of them aren't really known to public investors yet. Even institutional investors aren't really focused on that. And I think that as those parts of the value chain develop, you'll see value created in all of those. And I think institutional investors are hungry for that type of, and public investors are hungry for those types of companies, with different business models and different technologies that can, they're basically selling to the whole overall adoption of electric vehicles.
So I want to, I want to insert my own view of what Ben, I hate boring panels, so I'll tend to interrupt everybody.
So we started out as a boring panel already?
I just don't want to get there, So Ben talks like a lot of the analysts about woe is me, it's a bad market and stuff. But looking at this realistically, we've already shipped $1 billion worth of electric vehicles this year in a market that grew 100% from year to year. So we can all sneeze at that, but there's a lot of people out here who would love a company that shipped $1.5 billion a year in its second year in existence, and is on track to be 100% growth year to year. So it's pretty exciting. The reason is the automobile business is so humongous that if you get a little piece of it, it can still be exciting.
So with that, Richard, since we don't want to be boring, why don't you tell us, and then we'll go through, for each one of you, tell us a little bit about yourselves. You already told us, but more importantly, why are you doing this? I mean, you've done 6 companies, you guys are founders of other companies, you could be doing many other things. Why are you choosing to do this? What attracted you to this field? What's interesting to you? Yeah, go ahead, and we'll go through it.
I don't need much of an invitation, you can tell. So I've started companies before. But my last gig before Coulomb, I was the mayor of Cupertino. And there's an 8-year term limit. So after 8 years, they throw you out and you have to find something new to do. And that happened to me in 2007. And so I needed something new to do. I went on a tour, actually recommended by Meg Whitman, of Tesla, and fell in love with the place and ordered a car during the tour. And said, man, these guys are cool. These are engineers that get to build cars. Like cars are really fun for a lot of us. So anyway, I became enraptured with it, and then I went on a tour of the world and found everybody was doing it. Everybody but Honda. Honda was the only car maker that wasn't doing an electric vehicle, including companies like BYD. I went and drove the BYD cars in China, and so everybody was doing. So that was our big secret. Everybody's doing an EV, but nobody knows. A few people knew a little bit about Tesla, and that was about it at that point. Turns out I had been a victim of in a movie called Who Killed the Electric Car? I don't know if any of you saw that, but I had one of the Toyota RAV4s, and I was in love with my Toyota RAV4, and it was taken back by Toyota and crushed for no particularly good reason. It was a great car. Now they're building them again. So I had some scars from this, and so when I looked at, okay, there's an opportunity, there's all these EVs, what are the spin-off businesses that could happen? And so I looked at fueling. And basically EVs, you'll hear from all of us, suffer from 2 problems. One is the cost of batteries, and the second one is people are scared of charging them, that they won't be able to charge when they need them or whatever. They take too long to charge. So we decided to tackle that problem. So, we're in the business, like Silicon Valley is in the business of taking on tough problems and eating them for breakfast. Ours was the problem of charging the vehicles and making sure there's adequate charging infrastructure. What we found was that in the first try 15 years ago when my car was destroyed, part of what happened was it was completely created by the government, and I know how those scoundrels work. And what happened is it was created by the California Air Resource Board, and in 2002 the guys lost their nerve and they reversed their decision and they all went away. All the cars went away and mine was crushed. So we decided to use capitalism. So our contribution to this world is that we create capitalist reasons for building enough infrastructure so people will buy cars, so people will use the infrastructure, and we'll all make a lot of money. And so, like for instance, we do, when you charge at Target, your loyalty card knows you're there, and all the Target guys can run around and say, oh, you know, Mr. Kundargi is coming into the store, and we can go sell him some toilet paper, or whatever. But because they want to do an advertising thing, and they want people to linger. And apartment buildings want to charge people like it's a coin-op laundry. So we collect all the quarters from the tenants and send them to the landlord. Right? So everybody has their business model. That's what we do. We write business model software. We're known for our charging stations, but that's a small part of our business. 3/4 of our guys write business software. So that's our contribution to the thing. Why do we do it? To make money. You know, we've raised now what, $83 million in venture capital. So there's some other people who want to make money too, for sure. And why, you know, what's the possibility? Because we're supposed to have 3 million cars by 2015. That's only 3 years from now. 3 million cars worldwide, that's 6 million charging stations. That's $12 billion. So we expect it to be a $12 billion industry in 3 years, which gets the attention of the investors. So that's why we're doing it.
Sujit?
It's very hard to top that, Richard. I've had a very boring battery life, so I moved in the Valley in '96 with a PhD in material science, and I saw all my friends, you know, doing SAP and Oracle, becoming .com millionaires, and here I was doing battery chemicals. One success I had was taking a battery technology and using it for implantable medical devices like pacemaker and defibrillators. So I spent 10 years doing that, had a small little startup that got acquired by Great Batch. And I continued working for Great Batch till they decided to move our company to Buffalo, which is the headquarters. So like Buffalo, Silicon Valley, I decided to quit my job and stay here. so it was time to start a company, and so I kind of hang around with a power tool battery company, and then you know, everybody was talking that battery is the bottleneck for electric car revolution. So being a battery guy, it was very hard, like, you know, to turn away. So I rolled up my sleeve and started in VIA. So it has been like a fun experience, starting from grounds up, hiring a bunch of very smart people and putting the team together. So yeah.
Jim?
Thanks, Armando. So again, I'm Jim Castellas. So I grew up in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, a little tiny town. Came out to California for college in Southern California. And I loved it out here. I got stuck for grad school, so I went to grad school up the road here at Stanford, and it was at Stanford that I caught a really particularly virulent strain of the startup bug, and it was an unusual strain at the time, still is, the clean tech strain, because while all my friends were focusing on making the next iPhone app or social network or all that great stuff, I wanted something that I could touch and feel that I felt could kind of contribute to a larger vision and bigger problems that we've got here in social networks, and so I guess I ended up, but that's just my opinion. So I ended up actually following the fuel, and Motive is my second startup, and we write software for electric vehicles. I started Motive as a consulting company, and we did a few consulting projects, and what I realized was that we kept reinventing the software and controls for connecting a battery to a motor and putting them on a vehicle. I mean, that sounds like a pretty simple problem, at least from a mechanical perspective. You bolt them together and they're on the vehicle. But it turns out that's actually pretty difficult to do. There are a lot of different batteries out there, a lot of different motors out there, and different reasons to use different ones on different vehicles. And so what Motive ended up doing, with some help from our state of California here under a grant award, was actually productizing a suite of products that creates a battery-agnostic electric vehicle. So now we can take any battery off the shelf, plug them into a chassis, and have an electric version of a traditional truck chassis. So we work with the traditional truck builders, leverage their infrastructure to help them bring an electric option to the market. And I guess over this time, my focus, so I was doing electrical engineering at Stanford, my focus has shifted more onto the business side. One advantage of being a clean tech entrepreneur versus social media or something else like that is I was dating a woman who was going to become my wife, and I could tell her that I was making the world a better place. I think that sealed the deal, and and so just for that, and we just had our first kid, a baby girl, 3 weeks ago. So thank you. So yeah, I'm a little bit short on sleep, but it's all worth it. And we brought a shuttle bus to show you guys. It's out there. It belongs to our first customer, Bowers Transportation, who operates a lot of vehicles, about 150 here in the Bay Area. And this is his only all-electric, zero emissions vehicle. It gets about 140 miles, recharges in 2 hours. And it was really our first demonstration project. And it actually runs 2 separate battery systems from different battery suppliers side by side. We want to make the battery guys compete, no offense to Jeep, but when we make them compete for business, that's our way to kind of force competition into the market. We really see, I guess when I was at Stanford, I realized that it looked like Silicon Valley, the weather was Silicon Valley, but in reality, I was sitting in Detroit 1902. We are in the middle of such a cool revolution in the automotive industry, and who knows where we're going to be in 10 years, but it's going to be somewhere vastly different. And I just couldn't help but try and jump in and be a part of it.
Well, that's the first time I've ever heard of clean tech helping our love life. So I think that's a new argument to be used. So Ian, can you tell us about how you got here?
Sure. So I used to build networking products. That's pretty boring. So I was a co-founder of Tesla Motors, and I'm really glad, Ben, that you like them as an investment, and Richard, that you like them for the product. That's great. If you haven't driven a Tesla, go do that. They're really interesting cars. The Roadster is pretty quick and fun to drive, and the Model S is really a nice car. So that, Tesla went public a couple of years ago. Last time I checked, the market cap is about $3.5 billion, so I guess you can count that as a good thing for the investors. I think it was the first new car company in 70 years in the US. Everyone said it couldn't be done, and it has been done. So I became fascinated with the technology, right? This stuff is massively efficient. About 85% of the energy you get from the wall plug ends up at the wheels. And in the car you drove here tonight, about 85% of the energy you pour into the tank gets thrown away as heat. That's massive. So the interesting thing is, that's great, everybody loves that, but how do you turn that into a business? That's the interesting part. And the trouble with cars is that, they're cheap. And if you ask the engineers the wrong question, if there's a room full of engineers and you say, we want to make more efficient cars, they're going to say, well, what's the most efficient car we have and how can we make it better? So they'll pick something that already does 40 miles per gallon and burns 200 gallons a year, and they'll make it electric. The problem with that is it doubles or triples the cost of the car and it doesn't offset enough fuel to pay for itself. So I went off and thought about that, and it seems to me that there's 2 places that you can actually apply the technology and do something with it. And the first is in ultra-high performance cars. So after I left Tesla, the first thing I did was go and build one of those. So it does 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. I built it in 2005, and it's still the fastest street-legal EV on the planet. It's a lot of fun. But there's a limited market for that kind of thing. I think if you look ahead a bit, you're going to see some very interesting applications of electric drive to high-performance cars because of the control aspects of it. But if you want to get across the chasm and sell a lot of this stuff and actually build a scalable business, then you've got to be able to displace enough fuel to pay for the technology. Well, what burns the fuel? The trucks. So, if you're burning $15,000, $20,000 a year in fuel, then, and if you can save a lot of that, then maybe you can get a short enough payback. So we put a lot of effort into, what's the target market, the target drive cycle application, what's the best architecture, how can you get the shortest payback? And the answer to that is medium-duty trucks and metro drive cycle with a range-extended EV powertrain. So that's what we do, and there's one outside there, and those trucks with a diesel engine do about 10 miles per gallon, and without powertrain in them, they do on a cost-equivalent basis between 25 and 50 miles per gallon. So that gives you a short enough payback that you can actually get a real market. So that's what we're up to.
Cool. So one of the things you're seeing, one of the things you're hearing is that every one of these founders has looked for a difficult problem within the value chain of electric vehicles, and that's what they're going after. That's how they've built their company. They're not making incremental improvements, they're trying to hit real difficult things. So let's go on, one of the things that Jim had mentioned, and I think several of the other panel members, remember our theme was that we're recreating an industry that's 100 years old, right? We're fundamentally disrupting it. But this current industry is based in Detroit, but we are in Silicon Valley. So why don't we talk about what it is like to have a Silicon Valley startup work with the big three? What's it like to it's not like a small company working with SAP or working with Cisco. It's very different model. So maybe we can start with that. Maybe Ben, you can tell us your thoughts on how you've perceived that, and then I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on how does Silicon Valley work with Detroit?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll beat Tesla to death here over the course of this panel, but just using Tesla as an example, as one example of a success story, I think their relationship with both Toyota and then also with Daimler, I think is a great example of a new car company. I guess we can't call it a startup car company, but the success of delivering their technology to both of those big OEMs over a relatively short period of time. Some of the other sectors I cover sell to utilities, so both selling to automotives and selling to utilities can be very dreadful sales cycles and engineering cycles, as you know. Another company I cover, Maxwell Technologies, makes ultracapacitors used in start-stop hybrid cars. And they've had a more difficult time. So you can say on the other side of the story, they've been working at this for 8 years, and just are beginning to get penetration. And they have a couple models of cars using their technology. So I think that there's a spectrum there of Tesla's success story, and then Maxwell Technologies as maybe the downside and how it can take longer to sell to those companies. On smaller companies, we see a variety of the big OEMs making investments, strategic investments. So if I look at a public investor, a strategic investment always means something to a public investor. They get a little bit of reassurance that there's been some due diligence done around the technology, that it's a viable business model. So I think that's always helpful when you can attract strategic money.
Richard, what's your view on the big three?
So I don't know how many big ones there are, but so first of all, they're you have to work with them, but they're very challenging to work on. Just as an example of the story, we got a very early Chevy product, plug-in product. It was actually a Saturn Vue, which was before they had the Volt. And they sent it to us, and we said, stop for a second, because they put the charging port on the front left. And in America, we tend to park on the right side, and it's bad because that means the cord has to drape over your trunk or your hood when you charge. And we told them that, and they said, well, our focus study group said that we should really have it on the front left, so that's what we're doing. You just say, okay, but that's like dumb, but they'll do it anyway. So and then another typical one is we are somewhat dependent on the automakers to promote electric vehicles, and since most of them have other cars, and most of them, because the batteries still are too expensive despite the efforts, they don't really like selling them, the electric vehicles. They like to sell the gas cars because they make more money. And so you're sitting on a panel like this, and you got the Chevy guy here. I know him, Dave. And Dave says, well, we'd really rather sell Cruises, Chevy Cruises than Volts. And I'm on an EV panel with this guy, and I say, okay, great help. These are the guys we're counting on to promote these vehicles, but they really don't want to. So then you got to go back to their motivations. Their motivations are things like the California Air Resource Board sets the CAFE standard, so they can't sell any BMW 7s if they don't sell some Active E's that don't make any emissions. And that's the true motivations, and then you got to start playing into that. So you got to play into their emotions. Similarly with Chevy, when Chevy first came out with the Volt, they said you don't need charging infrastructure, which was also not a very helpful thing for our industry, for my industry. And the reason they did that is the woman who's in charge of charging infrastructure for Chevy is a woman named Britta Gross, and she was in charge of the hydrogen highway in California, which was this humongous flop. And people won't buy hydrogen cars because there are no hydrogen stations to fuel them up in. And so her thing has been, you don't need infrastructure with the Chevy Volt, just plug it in your home garage. Not too helpful, and then what she finds out later, which is something that we all know, is that 41% of all Americans live in apartments and condominiums, and if you don't solve the charging station for their market is cut roughly in half because they wanted to deny that problem. So it's always a challenge. You need them. It's a little bit like you can't live with them, and you can't live without them with these guys. There are some notable exceptions. I think Tesla clearly is on the EV agenda, so that's helpful. They speak very purely about the EV agenda. On the other hand, because they want to do everything just right, they don't adhere to standards. So that creates its own challenge. You can't plug it into the standard charging public infrastructure without an adapter. They're a little bit European in that way, that when you want to charge one of their vehicles, you have to either buy the charger from them or buy an adapter. So, part of the challenge of starting these companies is adapting to the world in which we live. And it's the automakers and the utilities. You could tell the stories with utilities are even more challenging. But that's part of what we do. Part of what we do is we're filling in the holes of this industry and creating a new industry out of it.
Sujit?
Well, as a battery maker, we absolutely need Detroit. They're our largest customer. But it's very challenging to deal with a large company as big as GM when you have only 10 to 12 people. And also, when you are like a battery chemistry company, how do you talk in automobile language? So it was very tough and challenging. And secondly, when you go and talk to a company like GM, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, they have so many different groups that are doing lithium-ion batteries. And if you don't talk to the right group, you can get caught in an endless R&D. By that I mean is that each of them will give you some project or something. Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? And you'll spend your equity dollars trying to do that, knowing that it will never get commercialized. So you have to be extremely careful when you deal with large automotive company. Not necessarily Detroit, I would also include Japan. So in our case, we decided that if you have really something good, and if you are saving money for our customers, they should pay for it. And we asked for the money. So when you ask for the money, it reaches to the right level, and then we ended up doing a joint development program with General Motors. Then raising capital became very tough, after the crash in 2008, and then we said we will not raise money from Sand Hill Road. I mean, they were our Series A, Series B investors. We said our customers should fund. So that's how we asked GM to lead the round, and they did. So working with GM Ventures has been fantastic. They had I don't know what's the other way to deal with a large company like that. They have helped us connect with different groups within GM who are the right people to talk to and how to take our R&D and to take it to a product. So right now I'm very happy with my Detroit experience, and it's working out to be well, and we hope to see components of our technology in Detroit cars.
Jim?
So a number of years back, when I started Motive, maybe before, I decided to look, the big three, what's their presence like out here? What are they doing in Silicon Valley? And I looked, and almost all of the major car companies have an office in Silicon Valley. They're little tiny offices, but I was encouraged by this. I thought, well, great. Okay, so they must be looking for something in Silicon Valley. What is it? Why do they come here? What are they looking for from us? And so I started to learn a little bit more about some of these offices. And one thing that I found is the office in Palo Alto for General Motors. One of their projects is a helmet that you can wear when you drive that will basically do an EKG on your head and will be able to identify if you're thinking turn left or turn right and turn on your turn signal to do that. So first, cool, I guess. Secondly, like, this is what Detroit thinks of Silicon Valley, was the conclusion that I was forced to draw from this. So you know, where did this leave me in thinking? Obviously, I knew we don't want to build vehicles. You know, building an entire vehicle is very capital intensive, and it turns out, you know, as much of a hard time as we give Detroit for their weather, or, you know, a lot of things, and I mean, you know, I don't know. I think that they also set up these offices in Silicon Valley as kind of vacation destinations. You do a good job, you get to go work in Silicon Valley. I don't know exactly, but you know, these guys are really, really good at certain things, and you know, they have their own vocabulary. You know, is that part PPAP? Are you TS 16949? You know, it's their own vocabulary. You know, ISO 2626262. Did I do that right? Yeah, I think that's right. That's the new functional safety standard that evolved after they had the sticky gas pedals for Toyota. So, you know, there are a lot of things that these guys, you know, we look at it and it seems like they're over-engineering it. They spend how many years to develop a vehicle? They're throwing away time. They have thousands of engineers on the Volt, and you know, a lot of that may be true, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of embodied wisdom in Detroit, and there are a lot of things that they do very well, and to a certain extent, I think that the fact that they write off Silicon Valley is a strength for us. You know, and it allows us to be more maneuverable and flexible and find those holes in that market, and you know, come up and who knows, maybe in 10 years. Detroit won't be the center of automotive anymore, or maybe they still will. I think the jury's still out on that. You know, but at the end of the day, when we work with Detroit, I can go knock on their doors all the time, and I can learn about the cool headset projects. But to really get their attention, the only way we do it is bringing them customers. They're building the vehicles. You know, we focus trucks and buses, like Ian does fleet vehicles. So, you know, if we want to get their attention, we've got to bring them a big fleet. Bring them a big fleet that wants to buy significant vehicles, that's going to move, you know, that's going to be something interesting for them, and then maybe you can start to get their attention.
Ian, what's your experience?
Interesting. So beyond the Detroit guys, I've also been talking to the European manufacturers. So the auto industry is interesting. It's 100 years old. They do some things, as Jim says, incredibly well. You can close your eyes and go buy a new car, and it will be safe, it will be functional, it will do everything they said it would do. That's awesome. It will also be incredibly cheap for what you get. Right? They're just unbelievably good at doing good safety engineering, good, you know, mechanical engineering, fantastic manufacturing. And that's what they're good at. But they do this by making minor incremental changes to a very old technology. And they test everything very carefully for a long time. They're very conservative engineers. And that's great. That's why you can just close your eyes and buy one and it'll work. It'll be safe. They're not good at disruption, and they're not good at new technology. Yeah, they've done, you know, GM breaks my heart. They do fantastic engineering. The Volt is the right architecture. It's brilliantly engineered. It's fantastic. It's the wrong application. It's $42,000, and they immediately came out and sold the same car with a gas engine for $20,000 against it themselves. I mean, what can you say? Volkswagen has 250,000 employees or something. Not one of them is a design electrical engineer. What they do is they write specs and they send them out to the tier 1 vendors. I want a black box to do this. I want a black box to do that. They don't do what we would think of as systems architecture from an electronics and software point of view. They don't do that. And that's why if you take a modern car, particularly a European one, and pull it apart and have a look, it's got 50 black boxes. It's got 50 pounds of copper in it connecting them all. It isn't the way we would do it if we started with a clean sheet of paper. Because of their conservative nature, they want to see, you know, 1 million miles on these things with no failures, and then they start to get interested. If you go to them as a Silicon Valley startup and say, hey, I've got a great idea, yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. So, you know, one of the decisions we made was not to make our company depend on selling the technology to the big guys. So our business model is that we make a retrofit kit for existing trucks and we sell it directly to the truck owner, the fleet operators. And they might be having to upgrade their powertrain because it wore out or because they need to meet the latest carb standards. They do this routinely. The truck may last 10 or 20 years. The powertrains last a lot less than that. So they're in the habit of changing the powertrains. And we can sell them, a retrofit powertrain that solves their emission problems, solves the worn-out problem, and gives them a 3-year payback on the fuel they save. Then saves them a lot of money after that. So there's a direct, immediate market that doesn't involve going through the big companies, doesn't involve going through a new product development cycle and all of the testing, and we get miles on the road with customers that will get the big guys interested in it. So then later they can license the technology from us. So that's our approach to the problem.
So let's switch gears a little bit now. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we won't get tied around the axle for that. But one of the key things about being a Silicon Valley company is that you have to raise money.
Yeah.
And fundraising for the idea of disrupting a 100-year-old industry, which is so efficient, which already makes very cheap, very good cars, must be challenging. So I'd love to hear, because I think from an entrepreneur perspective, to say, hey, if I'm interested in this, this is clean tech is, hard. How do I raise? I'd like to get your perspective on what you did to raise money, war stories. What made your investors interested. So we can start with Ian again and just go back down. I'd love to get your stories on fundraising in Silicon Valley for this industry.
Okay, well, the three of us that went out looking for funding for Tesla, we were all networking types, electronics engineers that had built networking products for 20 years. And we thought, let's go build electric cars. How hard can it be?
It's hard.
Yeah. So I don't think this is really a secret, but our original business plan for Tesla that we went out talking to VCs about said that we'd need $25 million to build this car company. And I think at the end of the day, Tesla's raised through loans and equity and IPOs and stuff about $1 billion. And really it is about $1 billion if you want to start a new car company.
But every software company comes up to me and says, hey, I need $5 million to break even, and then I'm good. And we're 50 million in, and we're still looking for that break even.
Yeah. So one of the things then I went out and started Rightspeed, and originally I went looking for funding to build very high performance cars. And so that didn't happen, and I had to think quite hard about, how can you actually apply this technology in a way that's capital efficient and is scalable and would attract investors, and that's what led me to what's outside there. So we've raised $10 million in angel money and another $7 million in CEC grants. We've spent about $8 million in less than 2 years to get to what you see outside, and that's all our own IP. So we're not building vehicles, we're just building the powertrain. We have an extremely high performance team. We've done really well, but we're not trying to build vehicles. So if you want to play in this space, I think you have to think pretty hard about what the capital requirements really are. And you have to understand how VCs work, right? Because I hope I'm not going to offend any VC investors by saying this, but they're, from my point of view as an entrepreneur, the way that they pick their investments is kind of like they just sort of throw darts at the wall, and some of the darts land on the target, and so that's where they go. So they might they'll reject 1,000 business plans and they'll fund 10, and of the 10, one will be a home run, and 2 or 3 will do pretty much okay, and 3 of them will be complete write-offs and they'll lose all the money. So they're looking for business plans where they can make a 10x on their money in 3 to 5 years. That's what they're looking for, because their method of selecting them is so poor that they've got to make the 10x in 3 to 5 years. So if you need $1 billion and it's going to be 7 to 10 years for an exit, that's not a VC fundable thing. So you really got to think about how much capital do I need, what is the exit going to look like, and how long is it going to take before you start out looking for money. Good enough?
Great. Jim, what's your view?
So I think we have this problem in Silicon Valley because we have a really large hammer, and so everything looks like a nail. the hammer that we have is venture funding. Everybody, if you're in LA, everybody's got a movie script. If you're in Silicon Valley, everybody's got a startup business plan. Everybody's got one. And I think everybody's startup business plan is looking for venture funding, and that's the way that fits their business plan. And it's just, especially with clean tech, it's just not always the case. There is, as Ian explained, there's a certain profile for companies that you have to have the hockey stick. You need scalability, high gross margins, all these other things that venture investors look for. A certain amount of capital required, a certain amount of time until you get your exit, and it works well for things like IT networking and and a variety of other industries where a lot of you have probably made just a ton of money. In clean tech, it's difficult to find that niche in clean tech that really has the scalability required to match venture funding models. That doesn't mean that if it doesn't match that venture funding model, it's not going to be a great company, or it's not going to be an important part of the clean tech or electric vehicle ecosystem. It just means that perhaps you shouldn't be wasting a lot of your time with VCs. Look for other sources of funding. So my own experiences with Motive were we kind of started as a consulting company, just looking around, learning about the space. After doing enough projects where we were connecting batteries to motors, putting them in a chassis, we saw this really scalable piece of the puzzle, which was software and controllers. That's what we want to do. That's like our little scalable piece of the puzzle. But rather than go for venture funding, we actually just wrote a grant application to the state of California. And as California residents and ratepayers, you're all kind of an investor, although you don't get any equity. But you're all an investor in Motive, so thank you very much. You've allowed us to develop some cool technology, which we think is going to really play a large role in electrifying trucks and buses. But I think there is a role for the government here because there is this huge collective good that comes from reducing emissions and reducing our dependence on foreign fuels. And so I think it bears some thought about matching your funding model to your business model.
So do you?
Well, for NVIDIA, raising Series A was very easy. It was in 2007, and the oil price was $130 a barrel, and Tesla was doing pretty well. So somebody had to do the batteries. So I didn't have to do much work on the business plan. So I think we funded in July, and within a couple of months, we raised our Series A. The challenge happened in Series B. This was in like early 2009, after the market crash. Now you have a proof of concept battery, and you want to scale your operation, and capital was not there. So that was the toughest time to raise capital. And in terms of stories, the toughest question I got was somebody asking, you guys know that there's no margin in this business, right? There's no margin in battery business, there's no margin in automobile business. So somebody said,